Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 147 of the Revive Yourself podcast. Here we go.
Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Have you got a health issue that just won't go away no matter what you try? Then welcome to the Revive Yourself podcast, where we reveal the secrets to long-lasting health by getting to the root cause of problems that no one else is talking about. So you can have more energy, clear skin, healthier hair, a leaner physique, more confidence, and most importantly, do the things you love and live the life you deserve. Here's your host, Ryan Martin.
So everyone, welcome back to the show. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're having a good start to the week. Been lots of stuff going on. Been getting lots of messages through, especially if you don't follow me on Facebook. Then it's my personal account, Ryan Martin, or the Revive account. You can get that at Facebook. Facebook.com/Revive Natural Health. Then you're probably missing out. I put a lot of posts on there, as well as I always put them on the Revive website too. But lots of posts on them, again, lots of comments. Especially got one out last week about soy. It still flabbergasts me that most people think soy is health food. If it's not fermented, it's just a health disaster for many reasons. Also going to be doing a post about corn soon. It's amazing to meet people actually eat that stuff. Don't know how terrible it is for their health. People have actually died eating corn. It's a fungus, and the way it's grown, they won't even let people in. It's started off by a chemical company, one of the UK's biggest chemical companies, and they won't even let people in to take pictures or to see what's going on, the way it's made. But some whistleblowers have told people how it's made, and it's not good, so I'll be doing an article on that. But yeah, it's been good. Everything's been going good, and got lots of good interviews lined up for you. Today's is excellent, and got some fantastic feedback on the last few episodes with Michael and Brian Hoyer and Dr. Nick Berry, who's just fantastic when it comes to essential oils. Talking about that, actually, if you head on over to www.essentialoilwizardry.com, you'll find the world's best essential oils, in my opinion. And if you put in the code REVIVE, you'll get 10% off of any order there. That's the same if you head on over to BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com. You'll get the best blue blocking glasses in the planet, in my opinion, from my friend Andy Manth. And you've got great styles there. In fact, you can send any frames over to him, and he'll make blue blocking glasses for yourself. He also does artificial light blocking glasses for the daytime, so you can wear them if you're on a computer, blocking the blue light that's coming off of your laptop or your screen that you're looking into. And so a couple of things. As always, if you do head on over to www.reviveyourself.co. We've got our shop there, and all our supplements from Evolution Organics, Ancient Purity, the Finchley Clinic. Got great gut revival bundle there from Finchley Clinic. From Evolution Organics, I always talk about Living Fuel, the Super Greens and Super Berry being the best products on the market by none, for an all-round product. Got lots of other things there, as well as our probiotics, fermented Chlorella from Dr. McCullough, fantastic in terms of cleansing the body, deodorizing the body, lowers cholesterol, lowers your toxic load, immune boosting, great for brain function. And all our mushroom drinks, they're there from Four Sigmatic. Any of them, adding them into your morning tea. Like, for example, if you go with Powdarco, which is at the Finchley Clinic, you can mix them all up, and you can have a really good tonic. And Information Purity, always going about royal jelly, very, very powerful immune booster. It's what the queen bee eats exclusively. It's why she lives 7 years longer than the rest of the bees. Vitamin D3 and K2 there from liposomal, and the vitamin C from liposomal too. I always like to mention these products because they're immune boosters, and actually I always talk about in the show, but if you want, in the winter there's no sun out, getting a therapeutic dose of UVB from a low-powered electronic ballast sunbed is very powerful, in my opinion. not a medical doctor, so I can't give medical advice, but I say in my opinion, when I do it and when my clients do it, they feel phenomenal. So and if you can't get to a low-powered clean sunbed, as I say, a healthy sunbed, nutritional sunbed, then definitely want to have some vitamin D3, K2 in your life, and you can get that from our shop and the link to Ancient Purity there. Let's go about some of the products, because I think it's very important. These are just immune boosting products, and they're vital for your health and vitality. And so, if you don't want to get ill, you want to keep your immune system nice and strong, then having these in your arsenal is always going to be a good idea. And also, I always talk about having the cleanest water, and if you want to have the cleanest water, then in my opinion you need a whole house filtration system, and they don't come any better from Aquatea. If you haven't listened to my episode with Graham Brebner, who's a rocket scientist, then I suggest you go back and listen to it. But we've got units that, if you've got a 1, 2, 3 or 4 plus bedroom house, then we've got units that can cover all of those options from Aquatea. And also, if you've got hard or soft water, if you click on our shop and buy that, I would highly recommend it, because you're not just drinking the water out of your tap, but you're washing your clothes in it, you're cooking your food in it, you're cleaning your teeth in it, and all those, you're washing your bed sheets in it, so you're sleeping in them. So it's really important not to have toxic bed sheets or water that is contaminated. So yeah, that's it for that part. Well, today, and also forgot, sorry, if you haven't already, heading over to www.thechronicfatiguesolution.com, where you can get my book, because one of the big things I've actually got is I want to try and affect 1 million people's lives, and I can get the information out that can help them. That's one of the reasons I did the book in the first place, is just because I want people to understand whatever chronic health issue they're going through, it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to live in pain. There is another way, and that's letting the body heal and getting out of its way. So the Chronic Fatigue Solution, the 3 big secrets to healing chronic illness, you can get that at www.thechronicfatiguesolution.com, and you've also got the option of an audio book version there as well. So if you don't like to read, you can get the audio version, which in my opinion, that's all I buy is audio books. But because it's funny, only 7% of the world do best learning through reading. The rest do best through listening or through watching. That's why they say don't feel bad if you don't feel good, or don't understand, or don't absorb information through reading, because a lot of people don't. So that's why we've got the option there of the audio book. And if any of you have had the pleasure of making an audio book, let me know how that went. But it's a good option, and getting lots of great feedback from the book. Actually, it is getting messages through saying people saying that how much it's opened their mind to certain aspects, especially regarding the gut health. And our gut has got more neurons than our brain and spinal cord combined. That's how important it is. So if you haven't got the book, then www.thechronicfatiguesolution.com. That will you can get it there, as I said before, hardback or audio version. And also, I just want to add, I know there's been a few delays with the book. We've actually had problems with the Royal Mail, and also my publisher hasn't been great, so I'm changing my publisher. So I want to get that out to you. So if you are having a bit of a delay, just hold tight. Send me an email. I'll look into it for you, but it will be with you. Remember, the book, I'm not actually getting anything from the book. You're just paying for postage and packaging, literally printing, postage, packaging, it goes out to you. I'm not getting anything from the book, because I want this information just to go out to everyone. And so if you have, we should take about 10 working days, so it can be 3 weeks, because it's got to be printed, etc. But just hold tight, send me an email, and I'll get it to you. My integrity is everything, and these delays have stressed me out a little bit, because I want people to get the information. I'm not here to rob anyone of their money. I just want you to get the information. So let me know if it's been a while, and I'll get onto it. Otherwise, it'll be with you shortly. Now, on to today's episode. Today's episode is with a young man called Elliot Overton. First come across Elliot whilst talking with Phil Escott, great friendly guy, Phil Escott, and he was telling me how knowledgeable Elliot is, and who Elliot deals with, and how Elliot had his own health issues and how he overcome them. So I thought it'd be great to have Elliot on the show, and we chat about lots of different topics, including like his own health journey, how he got into what he does, why having a plant-based diet isn't the answer for everyone, In fact, we go into people he doesn't work with, and also why certain ingredients in plants can cause issues. And we go deep into oxalates. If you haven't heard what an oxalate is, then I think it's time to listen up. So here he is. Here's Elliot. Here's the show. Enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side.
Excellent.
You're good? Good day?
Yeah, not too bad. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, mate. It's been, just a lot busy. As I guess you are. Everyone's ill. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, quite. So, my man, it's been good to finally get you on, because I've had Phil Escott talks very highly of you, so I thought it'd be good to have a conversation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and listen to a couple of the things you've done on oxalates. And you know what? It's a topic that I'd actually like to go into today, around other stuff as well, because it is actually a topic that I've known about, it's probably like you have, for years and years, but it's something that actually gets overlooked quite a lot, especially in today's way it's gone, in terms of everyone's going, let's go plant-based, and people just going, don't know how much of a problem that can be. And people get good results to start with because they drop out all the rubbish that they've been eating, but then after a while down the line. So we'll just get into it, my man. Like, because reading through your bio and stuff, you said you had some minor health issues yourself when you were travelling. What were they?
So I developed quite severe, what you would probably call post-infectious IBS. So that was essentially, I was traveling around India, and as you can imagine, I mean, from the word Delhi belly kind of thing, you come to contact with a wide variety of kind of pathogenic organisms that you're not ordinarily going to be coming into contact with in the Western world. So actually the immune system is less able to deal with that, right? And so typically Westerners can get quite sick in these kind of tropical countries, and I actually I got kind of digestive issues over there, and they never really went away, right? So there is this phenomenon referred to as post-infectious IBS, where actually if you have one of these infections and it lasts for long enough and you don't necessarily have the resources to deal with that or fully recover from that, then you can really develop kind of long-standing chronic gut issues after that time. And that's what happened to me. And so I came back to the UK and I tried to kind of resolve it that way. I went to my GP. I went through all the kind of traditional ways, and actually they didn't really help me in any way.
Made it worse?
So, well, I mean, I wouldn't say made it worse. It was just that I didn't get a resolution of the symptoms, right? So that's one of the things that kind of really spurred me on to look into more alternative or natural methods to deal with this, and inevitably coming across kind of various kinds of diets and things. And that eventually led me on to the Western Egg Price Foundation,
cool,
where they kind of talk about ancestral nutrition and kind of principles based on what human beings would have eaten kind of throughout our evolutionary period kind of thing. And so I kind of embarked on that, and I saw some pretty good benefits in quite a short period of time. So that's one of the things that got me quite interested in nutrition. I mean, this was about seven years ago now. But yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, when I said that they make you worse, because generally, if we go and see a doctor or GP, they might just throw antibiotics or something like that, and once again destroy your microbiome. Wipe out your immune system, your gut flora, and that can, if you've got an infection. Do you know what infection you had? Did you get tested? Did you get tested? No,
I wasn't tested over there. No, I wasn't tested over there. Nothing came back. I mean, I did some stool testing, like some functional testing afterwards. Yep. There was a couple of things that came up. I'm not sure whether it was the same stuff as what I developed in India. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I had some kind of Clostridia bacteria lying around. I had a couple parasites here and there and things.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, the kind of functional medicine protocols to deal with that, even they weren't that effective, kind of thing, the antimicrobials and stuff. I've actually found that, a lot of the times I think gut infections generally, and this may be off topic, but I'm under the impression, and this is kind of how I work with people now, is that oftentimes gut infections, simply targeting the infection itself, that can help in some cases, but in other cases, It's more related to the environment in the gut, right? So if the immune system in the gut is not functioning properly, or if there's a variety of factors which can kind of predispose one's gut to allowing these infectious bacteria, protozoa, fungi and things to proliferate. So I think that actually it was working on the system as a whole kind of thing, improving metabolic health, improving immunity systemically and things, and optimizing nutrient status. I think that was actually one of the key things to actually improving the health condition.
Yeah, I always liken it to gentrifying an area. You're making the area different. We want more of the bad guys to move away, more of the good friendly bacteria to move in, making it always say to people, imagine a plant has its soil on the outside, we have our soil on the inside, and you want that soil to be working for us rather than against us. And as you say, when you go to these places and you're exposed to all these different pathogens, bacteria, parasites that you're not used to, your body's like, whoa. And so it can be, there's certain things that I would say to people if it's the first time there, that take this or do this, make sure, because as you said before, it's you're targeting the individual thing as you found and I found as well. Yeah, it can be beneficial, but once you have an environment that doesn't allow these things to breed or proliferate, then you're onto a winner. So it's interesting. Took a snapshot there, Elliot.
Sorry, yeah, I accidentally did. I was trying to change the window there.
That's right, mate. Sorry. That's all right. No, so it's cool. So yeah, that's no worries. I didn't know if you had any further testing PCIP or any test, but if you didn't know, you overcome it. You just overcome it on your own in terms of changing that internal environment, and things just start to get better.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I did a lot of work on the diet. I started moving more. I started trying to fix my sleep, and I found that that stuff was key. I mean, I did do some kind of botanical protocols and things, but I used probiotics and that kind of stuff, the typical kind of gut healing protocols. But actually, I found that stuff it only provided temporary relief kind of thing. I think a lot of it was consuming foods which my immune system, for whatever reason at the time at least, did not agree with, right? So continually eating foods which were irritating my gut, which were activating the immune system down there. And I think probably causing some degree of intestinal permeability and things, likely kind of messed up the environment, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, was your diet good back then? So when you're saying this, when you're saying to people, because this is one of the things that we're going to get onto, people say, "Oh, that food's healthy." It's like, yeah, but if your body can't tolerate it, it doesn't matter if it's a health or quote unquote health food. You can get a reaction to it. People can get a reaction to anything, avocados, for example, or whatever. But was you having reactions to foods that were healthy at the time, or was you having reactions to foods that were like typically westernized foods? Processed, heavily processed foods. What was you eating?
No, actually, I mean, this is kind of the paradox, right? And this is what many of my clients find. Actually, the unhealthy processed foods were not causing that much of a problem, right? Often because the fiber and things had been taken out of it. Now, that's not to say that, I was eating a bunch of processed foods at that time, because I was trying to change the trajectory of my health kind of thing. So that was one of the first things that I cut out. But actually what I was finding that I was reacting to, and again, this is kind of very common with anyone diagnosed with gut dysbiosis or SIBO or whatever, is that actually many of the so-called healthy whole grains and legumes and kind of very fibrous fruits and vegetables, they would be causing more of a problem than many other things. So it actually got to a point where I found out that the kind of only things that I could tolerate for a long period of time were basically just the animal foods and a few vegetables and maybe some fruit here and there. But generally, many of the foods which were kind of so-called healthy were actually causing severe gut distress.
That's. I mean, and talking about Western A price, that doesn't surprise me that you went onto that protocol. And it always, whenever you talk to, this is the thing, I try not to pick a side, because I'm generally in the middle. I want to do what works for most people majority of the time, and some people do really well on a vegan diet. Other people get destroyed by it. Same with carnivore, etc. But someone's getting a massage in the background. Was it your
Sorry,
phone?
I think it's the next door neighbours doing some drilling or
Is
something.
it? No
I'll
worries.
mute when I'm not talking.
No worries, my man. No worries, my man. So what I was going to say was, so with them, they a big believer in grass-fed butter, ghee. You know, here in the Weston A. Price went round, and anyone who hasn't read Weston A. Price's book, you know, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, needs to do it, especially because I don't know. It's just at the moment in today's society, of everyone pushing this vegan agenda, which we can get into. In the long term, I think it's going to leave a lot of people very sick, even though they might get short term, because clearing the body out for a period of time can be phenomenal, but doing it long term can have a problem. But I'm not surprised that you went down that route. And having looked at your site, you talk about how you deal with people with ancestral nutrition, intelligent movement, stress management, medicinal plants, and circadian biology, which is like covering all bases, which is what most people need. You know, always find a lot of the time these specialists. We have to say the specialist is someone who knows more and more about less and less, and to know absolutely everything about nothing, you know. So it's good that you cover all that. But I did notice on your list you had, before we get into this, but it's interesting, people you don't work with. Okay, people you don't work with.
Yeah.
You okay to talk about this?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's interesting. Cancer, anorexia, people with that eating disorders, kidney disease, vegans, strict vegans, night shift workers, or people who are not radically willing to change their diet and lifestyle. Now, we'll go into the vegan one is an interesting one. I'm because some of them just don't want to eat meat, even if it means that they're going to get better, which is probably why. Cancer. Go from cancer. Why cancer?
Right. So, cancer. I mean, as a collection, you know, cancer is not one thing. There's multiple different kinds of things, but ultimately, it's so complex. Generally, the way that it presents clinically and the way that you deal with it, there's no clear-cut answer, in my opinion. And I have previously worked with a couple of people with cancer, and I kind of regretted it afterwards, right? Because I don't feel like my knowledge set per se, or I don't feel like I have the expertise to effectively provide them with the best care, right? There are people who specialize in cancer therapy. There are people with lots of experience. And if we're looking at some kind of terminal cancer, it's not necessarily that I don't want to work with them. It's that if they've got a short period of time, potentially a year, a couple of years to live, or even in some cases they've been given a prognosis of like 4 or 5 months, then I want to make sure that they are in the best possible hands to make the most out of the short period of time that they've got, right? And with my skill set and the kind of work that I do, I don't feel like I can offer someone that. And I think that actually, I would much prefer to refer them on to a specialist who can provide them with the service that they need, kind of thing, to give them the best possible outcome.
Yeah, that's fair enough. No, I understand. I just feel like your approach, as with most of the guests I get on this, would be one that started to create health. So I get what you're saying. But it was just like, I feel like people would benefit from listening to yourself as well. I mean, but that's just my opinion. Anorexia, this is the other one. Had challenges with people with eating disorders?
Well, when I say anorexia, there's two forms. There's a clinical form. There's like physiological anorexia, which is essentially where the appetite, the parts of the brain which regulate appetite are kind of shutting down, or there's a dysregulation in the feedback loops involved in appetite. So actually they can't physically get hungry. I will work with these people. It's the anorexia nervosa that I will not work with. And the reason for that is because aside from there are very real or well-established physiological changes in anorexia nervosa, like things like chronic nutrient deficiencies, etc. But at the same time, there is almost without doubt a very strong emotional component there, right? And oftentimes, many people with anorexia nervosa will tend to benefit, as per my kind of rudimentary understanding, and I don't have much experience in this area, but the idea of restricting foods can actually, it can very much kind of compact
Make
their
them worse.
condition, right? Yeah. It can kind of make it can reinforce the emotional issues that they have around food. And ultimately, a lot of my work is actually based on restricting foods. I find that the best clinical outcomes come when it's usually not adding that much. I mean, yeah, there are some foods that I tell people, yeah, okay, we need to add these in, we need to add these in, and we need to add these in. But ultimately, a lot of the benefits, you'd be surprised, are actually coming from taking out foods. And the problem is that if I'm going to work with someone with anorexia and reinforce this idea that there's certain foods which can be causing them problems, then that could potentially be misinterpreted in a way that, kind of reinforces their emotional or their unhealthy relationship with food. Yeah. And so it's just somewhere that I don't personally go.
Fair enough, man. No enough. We sort of get you cutting in and out there, but that's all right. We got knock on the wall. Get rid of him, whatever he's doing. Well, is this your office you're working in?
I'm currently at home. All right. I don't work on Fridays and Wednesdays.
Oh, that's cool. No worries. I didn't know if it was safe if your patients come in, that would drive them insane. But that's all right. So the next one was kidney disease.
Yeah, okay, so kidney disease, again, when you're kind of at end-stage kidney disease, then ultimately there's very little that I can do as a nutritional therapist in terms of supporting them with nutritional supplements. Some of the kind of dietary recommendations that I can give, there's a lot of nuances with chronic kidney disease. For instance, protein intake, there is a possibility that may need to be restricted. And really that needs to be something which is kind of fleshed out by like a registered dietitian who has experience with these kind of, with chronic kidney disease. It's, again, there's always room for kind of, it's not a black and white thing, but ultimately if someone's at the end stage where they're requiring dialysis, then I'm not going to work with them because there's too many variables and there's things that I could be recommending that I am unaware that could actually cause them problems.
Yeah,
right?
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough. And so, I mean, night shift workers, I understand, just not giving their body enough time to literally rest and repair, and they're just constantly... Yeah, most of them are constant in their the sympathetic nervous system. They're just really stressed. Don't allow their body to get. And people obviously that aren't willing to change their diet and lifestyle, I get it, because at the end of the day, most people do. The Western lifestyle, as you say, we're more intelligent and advanced than ever with technology, yet we're fatter and sicker than ever, because people just generally are eating foods that are just calorie dense and nutrient deficient, and highly inflammatory and allergenic. So I get that. Now, this one, vegans, is going to cause some stuff, which is good. End of the day, look, I love. Do you know who Paul Chek is?
No, I'm not familiar with Paul Chek.
Right. Your task from me for the next week is to listen to everything Paul Chek's ever written. He's like the holistic godfather. He's out in California, but he's got the Chek system, and he's like you'll love him. He's wicked. Like he's really good. And he talks about like people. Well, in these situations, it's amazing how like the belief system can be so strong that they won't change their diet even when they're... I mean, I've had... You might have spoken to vegans as well, and they come to me and say, well, I'm not prepared to eat meat. I say, okay, what if eating meat would return you to health? Would you rather be ill or would you rather be healthy? Oh, I'd rather be ill. Is this the sort of thing you're going down?
Yeah, exactly. I used to be a vegetarian and quite a militant one at that. And it was very kind of what you would refer to as emotionally driven. And I actually think a lot of... Sorry about the noise.
It's all right.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of the time in people who are kind of attracted to veganism or vegetarianism for the love of the animals, kind of, and I put that in quotation marks, I think a lot of the time it has to do with unresolved emotional traumas. I think there's a lot of underlying stuff like guilt and things that go into that. And there's also a lot of propaganda around kind of, this idea that it's actually better for the animals. But yeah, it's a nuanced topic and there's a lot that can be said about it. But ultimately, I will refuse to work with vegans And I generally refuse to work with vegetarians as well. And, there's several reasons for that. Like you just said, oftentimes the focus is not on their health. There are other reasons why they're doing veganism. So they might, in a few cases, if someone's vegan, literally they go vegan because they think it's going to improve their health and they're willing to change, then I will work with them. But actually the militant vegans, or the ones which are doing it for the environment, or the ones which are doing it kind of based on the principles, it's very difficult to make any progress with those, because actually a lot of the time the health conditions that they are experiencing are directly caused by the diet that they are consuming. And so unless they're willing to change the diet, then what's the point? It's a waste of my time and it's a waste of their money,
Yeah.
There's very little that can be done for someone like that.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. And I think a lot of it, I've spoken in depth with Paul Check about this and a few others, and I think a lot of it comes from also wanting to belong to something. As I said, we used to have communities and now we don't. And even though we've got social media, everyone seems to be disconnected. So having that place to belong to, almost like a church, like the church of veganism. And look, I always say, if it works for you, great, but if it's not working for you, at what point do you start thinking, oh, maybe it's a diet, or maybe it's a few things that I'm doing, And I always talk about health much more than just food, as you've noticed yourself. You've got to have the right amount of movement, reducing your stress, sleeping well, clean water, less exposure to EMFs and all these other things. So it's a huge part. But if you're not putting foods in your body that allow it to nourish and heal, then it becomes an issue. And after a while, I say to people, I don't even want to try to get in arguments with these people anymore online, because they're like, oh, people haven't. I say, okay, but this is the funny thing with this. I always say, like, okay, because I sit in the middle. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then whatever. And I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm not the person to work with, because I'm going to tell you we need to change a few things. But when they say, oh, they weren't doing it correctly, it's like, get in my head, just want to smash it against the wall. It's like the people that come to me, and probably to you, are definitely the ones that have been doing it correctly, quote unquote, in terms of they have cut out all refined, processed, intermittently dead foods. They have been eating, they've even been having B12 injections and whatever else. They've been doing everything else you can imagine, fermenting their foods, soaking their foods, and they still feel terrible. And then they wonder, anyone who wants to look into it, just go and look at Tim Sheaf. He was like what he looked like before he went back to animal foods, and it's just a different person. And so, look, I get it. Sometimes the body needs to go through periods of cleansing, and if that works for you, different times, it's cool. But I completely understand with you in that one, because it becomes, you literally hitting your head against the wall, right? And it's just like you can't do your job, and they can't get the results. So what's the point?
Yeah, and if you're on any diet, which means that you almost by definition need supplemental B12 or, hydroxy B12 injections, then it's a pretty good indication that diet is not suitable for you, right? If you have to take an artificial supplement, now this is not to say that human beings, that I'm against supplementation. I think it's massively beneficial in many cases for a variety of things. But if, as a standard kind of protocol, the diet is not providing you with enough B12, then, it's a pretty good indication that actually the diet is not suitable for your body, because you need vitamin B12, right? And you could say that about practically, there's probably 16, 17 nutrients that applies to on a vegan diet, and there's always context. So ultimately, if we're looking at kind of one's ability to synthesize carnitine, for instance, right? So some people can do that quite sufficiently. Carnitine is a very important it's an amino acid which we're essentially using in our muscles, and we're using it kind of to burn fat, right? So it's enormously important. Now it's considered as non-essential or conditionally essential. I think it's non-essential, and what that means is that you can synthesize carnitine, kind of relating to the methylation process. Some people synthesize it more than others, and you need certain precursors to make enough carnitine. Now, if you can't synthesize carnitine for whatever reason, or if you're one of the people whose synthesis is slightly lower than someone else's for due to some genetic SNP, then actually then you need more from the diet. And the primary place that you find carnitine in the diet is red meat, right? It's in the muscles. So again, this kind of argument can be made for a variety of nutrients, and I think that it can help to kind of explain why some people do fairly well on a vegan diet. I mean, there are the outliers, and I'll be clear about this. I believe they are outliers. The people who can remain on a vegan diet for a long period of time and kind of remain relatively healthy, these people are the outliers, because the majority of individuals who do follow vegan diets generally tend to fail after about 3 or 4 years, if they even get that far. And then picking up the pieces of that, and many of the people on these kind of online arguments or in the documentaries, they've only been doing veganism for 6 months. So they've cut out all of these horrible kind of processed foods, and then they wonder why they feel better when they eat whole food, plant-based diet. And it's like, yeah, because they've cut out a lot of the crap. But actually, over a long period of time, you're looking at year, 2 years, 3 years, that's when the body really, really, really starts to become depleted in some of the things that you just simply can't get from a vegan diet. And actually, a lot of my practice, I deal with people who have been on these diets and completely derailed their health. And unfortunately, in the kind of local or the subsections of communities within veganism, and you can have kind of fruitarianism, and you have all of these other kind of groups and things on it. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of different kind of denominations, but ultimately what you find is that, as you kind of highlighted before, is that they are generally told that they're doing it wrong. Right. So they're told that they need to start fermenting their food, or they're told that actually some of them actually say that their body is producing so much mucus, and that's a way of detoxifying the dairy products, or it's a way of detoxifying the acidity caused by animal products. I mean, this stuff is, you just couldn't make it up, right? It's absolutely.
You can. They do.
Well, yeah, they do. I mean, it's amazing. But hearing some of the stuff that comes out of that Dr. Robert Morse's mouth is, I mean, there's absolutely no basis in physiology whatsoever for it. But essentially, there's a lot of people who believe it. And so actually, when their health does gradually tend to decline, then they are told that they need to be taking this herb or this new supplement, or it's for some unknown reason. It's not because they're actually severely nutrient deficient, and their body is kind of crumbling,
Well, yeah, 100%. And it's, as you said before, I always look at a very simple way of looking at it. Say plants or herbs, they can cleanse and clean, and animal foods, animal products, they can build. Yeah. So if you go through like a period of cleansing, it's fine, but then you need time to build. It's why we have winter, spring, summer, and autumn. So different periods of time, so that you can add different foods. We're not actually meant to be having all these foods all year round that we're doing. So you get different times to have different foods, and generally, and when it's really hot outside, I mean, not many people want to be sitting there just drinking, raw butter, raw milk. I mean, you can do, but it's not as nice as having, for example, a salad. That's why people eat lighter. And so just when you go, oh, it makes sense. I get that sense to me all the time. The stuff you say, right? It just makes sense. It's like, oh, right, I find that, yeah. How about you use your brain and stop listening to these nonsense? I don't care what people write, but this is what it sort of annoys. It annoys me because, I say it annoys me, I'm getting to the point where I'm literally, I talk about this because I want people to actually understand it, but get to the point where I'm just like, okay, you want to eat that way, no worries. I mean, just do what you got to do. But I just don't want people to have to go through it, because I know what's coming. And as you said before, you cut out loads of rubbish, and these are people that have generally not been eating great for quite a while, having cereal and toast and having heavily refined foods and lots of stuff, additives, all these things, and poor meat choices, and then they cut all that out and they start eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and they feel great, and until they don't. And that's the problem. So, and that's why it's important to have those periods of building, or even just to mix them up. And so, for a lot of people, we're going to get into why some plants won't be great for people. But it's definitely something I completely agree with you on there, my man. And it's hard to say, and you don't want to sound like patronising or arrogant, but it's like, I think we might be justified in a few years. And the problem is, you've got these documentaries like Game Changers coming out, and you've got someone there who's just so dogmatic about what they're saying. It's like, and then people believe it because it's on Netflix. It'd be interesting to get I can't remember his name, James. I can't remember his name. what was his name? He was on the Rogan podcast.
Yeah, James something. I can't remember.
I remember I'd like him to have a chat with Paul Sardino. That would be an interesting
conversation.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation. Because Chris Kresser, when he was on it was just a bit like he was just going after his credentials, even though Chris, pretty intelligent bloke, I think it helps a lot of people. And the other thing, we can talk a bit about that in a bit, where some of these honest burgers and stuff, because you probably get this in the oxalates. But you mentioned there about supplements, how they are important, and I've seen you've got a seminar or a conference in Boulder, Colorado. You'd be talking about how important supplements are, because some people go, you don't need supplements anymore, because you can get all the nutrients from food, which I think 50, 60 years ago may have been true. But today, I think the way that our food's produced, especially if you're not eating organic, these foods they're literally just like empty. They're not there. The better salt they put on the ground, it just allows these foods to get bigger and bigger. But you're actually eating like just a dead food almost. How important do you feel that supplements are?
Well, I mean, I think it's context dependent, right? So if someone's relatively kind of metabolically healthy, if they don't have any kind of pre-existing health conditions, if their gut is in quite good shape, then there's a strong possibility that if they are hitting all of the bases in terms of eating the right kind of foods, then it seems to be possible that people can exist on quite a limited diet and not become severely deficient in nutrients, right? So you spoke about the conference. The conference is basically, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with kind of the carnivore diet, but it's basically a conference which is put together of a variety of speakers talking about using an animal-based diet, which is basically free from plant matter, so no fruits, no vegetables, no grains, purely meat, fat, and kind of eggs, dairy maybe. But basically just foods from the animal kingdom, using this kind of approach not only to support health conditions, but actually to maintain health and to maintain good nutrient status. So without a doubt, some people can do this. They can survive on a relatively limited diet. But at the same time, if someone has some kind of chronic health condition, what we have to understand is that the way that the metabolism changes in certain health conditions, the way that the gut changes, the way that our cells, how they make energy, things can, let's say, essentially the way that cells work changes, right? It's different. And that actually in someone who is chronically sick, in someone who has, say, an autoimmune condition, in someone who has chronic digestive issues or a history of some kind of severe nutrient deficiency, it's very difficult to obtain what you need to obtain from food to effectively resolve that, right? So I'll give you an example. If someone has been on a very high sugar diet previously, they've drunken loads of alcohol, and at the same time they are type 2 diabetic, right? What that likely means is that they are going to be running quite a severe thiamine deficiency, right? It's vitamin B1 is very important to metabolize carbohydrates, and that when we eat lots of refined carbohydrates, we can very easily deplete ourselves of this nutrient and actually run up a deficiency. Now, this can take a very long time kind of to rear its ugly head in our symptoms, but it does happen. And so essentially in this kind of case, when someone develops the end stage deficiency symptoms, say they start getting neuropathy, or they get kind of central fatigue, or they develop some kind of autonomic nervous system dysfunction because of it, then essentially what the research has shown is that when someone gets to such an end stage of a deficiency, you can't just give them a healthy diet and they get better. It doesn't work like that, right? It's when they go so far, you have to intervene with extraordinarily high doses of nutrients. We're talking up to 1,000 times the recommended daily allowance of what you could get from food. So to give you an example, the amount of thiamine that you get from food, what's recommended is about 1 to 2 milligrams. On a really well-formulated diet, you might be hitting maybe 3 to 4 milligrams per day, right? That is a good level to sustain health. Problem is that to treat a chronic thiamine deficiency, you can need up to 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams every single day. And that's not just for a week. That's not just for a month. That's potentially for a year. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that when someone spirals down in their health to such a large extent, then because we are living in an unnatural world, right? There are toxins, there are chemicals, there are kind of refined foods, there is EMF, there's all of this other stuff which is actively depleting us of nutrients in one way or another, whether it's causing oxidative stress, depleting vitamin C, depleting glutathione or other antioxidants, coenzyme Q10, whether it is some other, say, organophosphates, which bind with minerals and bind with nutrients in the gut and actually stop us from absorbing that. Whether it's any other kind of component, essentially, the environment that we're currently in is effectively depleting us, right? And so when we are in this unnatural environment and we develop a health condition, sometimes I'm of the opinion that we need to resort to unnatural means to address that in some people. Right?
Oh, 100%.
And anyone who says any different, I mean, I question whether they have seen people or worked with people who are really poorly, because these people, especially, I mean, I get a lot of people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, problems with the central nervous system, usually relating to kind of either chronic toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, or some kind of underlying nutrient deficit. You can't just give these people a healthy diet and they get better. It doesn't happen. I haven't seen it yet with a chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, there may be some cases, but actually I go in with very high doses of specific nutrients, sometimes based on testing, sometimes not. And that is when you really see the improvement. So
I want to talk about it. You said another thing I want people to actually understand that you said a year. A lot of people want to fix their problems in whatever, and generally they can see a massive improvement by doing things right, but they need to keep on doing things correctly because their body takes time to adapt, especially when you've had these issues for so long. These deficiencies can be deeply rooted. And you mentioned there and if you talk about, mega dosing vitamin C has worked for so many deficiencies. I was talking about this with people talk about polio. So, do you ever heard of Dr. Robert Klenner, who cured 60 cases of polio in the 1940s with a poor quality of vitamin C? And they mega dose lots of vitamin C, and it's phenomenal. They've done it for so many different issues, and doctors out there will refuse to believe it. And it's like, well, go and research it, and just open your mind and just try and believe, or not believe, but try and just have a critical eye on things. The product that I use with my clients, I don't know if you've heard of it before, Elliot, is Living Fuel. You ever heard of Living Fuel?
No.
So it comes from a guy, and I've known about Living Fuel for about 10 years now. It comes from a guy called Casey Cracy who developed it. Lucky enough, he was a multi-millionaire, and he developed it because his wife was really, really ill, and 2 scoops of it is equivalent of $260 worth of organic produce. This is how powerful the nutrient levels in it are outrageous. If I showed you them, when I give it to clients, they're like, "Oh my god!" They literally can't. It used to be given in cancer wards in America until pharmaceutical companies said we don't want this in our thing anymore. It's I'm sure you've got your protocols, but something like this, it just floods the body. I mean, all sorts of nutrients, even Krebs cycle minerals, for example. So it's a very if you haven't heard of it, I'd be interested to see what you think, because they've got the amount of levels, and as you said, because people need over the daily recommended dose, because daily recommended doses for a lot of people. Especially even people without a debilitating illness, just general public walking around looking like they're extremely tired. They need more nutrients in their diet, and the other thing is they need to actually be able to absorb and assimilate these things. And so, do you have a lot of people that come to you with those issues? Do you have to fix their gut as well as giving them other supplements?
Yeah, generally, if someone does have issues with absorption, digestion of food, then it sets the stage for these kinds of things, right? It sets the stage for deficiencies in generally the B vitamins and whatnot. A lot of the time, you need to work on multiple levels, right? So rather than just giving them a supplement, it's like, okay, so we need to address the cause. Like, why is this person so low? Sometimes you run an organic acids test and you see someone who eats meat, but they're still severely vitamin B12 deficient. They're functionally deficient in B12. And oftentimes what you'll see in these people is that when they go to their GP, for instance, they'll have a really high B12 level in the serum, but they display all of the symptoms of B12 deficiency. And at the same time, when you do a functional test, like an organic acids test, you'll see that actually they are deficient in B12. So what's happening is they can't use it inside cells, and it's ending up spilling into the blood, so it looks really high. And so a doctor will miss that. But actually, if you know what to look out for, then you can kind of address that, right? And what was the question?
I was saying,
yes.
Do
you address the gut?
Because if they can't assimilate these things, if they can't absorb these things, it becomes like it's the same with vitamin. Like those people deficient in vitamin D, but because they've got such gut issues, they can't actually absorb it. So, I mean, I don't know if you do. I do. I recommend low-powered vitamin UVB electronic ballast sunbeds to some of my clients, because I'm like, if you live in an area that has literally getting nothing from, I've interviewed Dr. Hollick on this. I don't know if you know who he is. He's got the vitamin D solution out, and he's like, these people can't absorb anything through their gut, and so I recommend them. I said, look, very different. There's different types of sunbeds as well. Most of highly powered UVA magnetic ballast. That's where a lot of the issues have come from in my research. The other ones, and they go, oh my God, Ryan, I feel phenomenal. You know what else? I haven't been ill this year. I'm like,
right, yeah.
And it makes a world of difference. And people go, you recommend sunbeds? I'm like, it's different. It's like saying, there's different levels of car or whatever it is, And so for me, that's one that people with gut issues that don't absorb vitamin D very well. I mean, you probably notice it for other issues as well.
Yeah. Generally. Yeah, I mean, if they can't properly synthesize bile acids, if they've got something called bile acid malabsorption, if they've got problems producing pancreatic enzymes and things, then there's usually nutrient absorption issues. So in response to your previous question, kind of working on all fronts, trying to support digestion temporarily. If you need supplements or, kind of functional foods or whatever, then that generally tends to work. And then, I mean, there's various kinds of forms of other nutrients as well, like emulsified fat-soluble vitamins. So, for instance, a mixture of D, E, A, and K kind of thing, but in an emulsion. So it means that you don't have to emulsify it. It's kind of pre-digested, so you're better able to absorb that. So, I mean, there's lots of kind of options in that regard. But I tend to find if someone really kind of cleans up their diet and identifies the things which are potentially causing triggers, causing inflammation, causing irritation in the gut, then that stuff, ideally will hopefully clear up itself within time.
Yeah, it's amazing what can happen when you get out of the body's way, right? When you start to put all these, I mean, when holistic living will help a lot of people in terms of just getting things right, their sleep, cutting out so many things that inflame the gut. Letting the gut. I say to people, how are you going to let your gut heal, or any part of your body heal, if you keep on picking it? If you get a scab, do you let it heal over, or do you keep picking it? And it's like, well, you keep on picking it, you're going to have problems, and then get gut permeability, and then that can lead to all manner of issues, once things start going through. So one of the things I want to talk about, because it is interesting, because these, especially with game changers and this move to veganism and plant-based, and people thinking that getting more plants in their diet's going to produce fantastic results, which it may do short term, but in the long term, issues. Now, not just because they become deficient in certain vitamins, minerals, etc., but also because there's certain compounds in these plants that can cause problems within our body, and one of them is oxalates. So they've got other things, lectins and things like that, but these oxalates are very rarely talked about unless you're probably in our world and you know about them. But if I went down the street and said to someone, "Hey, my man, do you know what oxalates are?" How many people out of 10 do you reckon know?
Probably 0.00001, maybe, or 0 out of 10.
I reckon 0 out of 10, and this is something that needs to be talked about, and certain things, because I say that when you've got a healthy person with a healthy gut, a lot of these plant foods probably aren't going to be a problem, and based on the hormesis, a little bit of them can build up tolerance. But how many people these days are healthy, and how many of them have got a healthy gut, and how many of them know that eating? This is the one thing I want to talk about as well, because I've been there, as you probably have as well. When I was going there, if I have one scoop of my greens drink, maybe 10 scoops would be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the overconsumption of these, like for want of a better word, superfoods or healthy foods can become a big problem. And so, what's in your research, how much is oxalates? So first of all, for people out there who haven't read books like the Plant Paradox, etc., what are oxalates?
Oxalates, well, they fall into a category of what you would probably call plant toxins. So have you spoken about the other kind of plant toxins on this podcast before?
I'm trying to think who I've had on.
No, things like lectins or anything?
I think we might have ever had on maybe a year ago or so. So actually lectins. I think we talked about it with Terry Tillard. But there are. I can't remember who the author of the Plant Paradox is.
Stephen Gundry.
Yeah, Stephen Gundry. I'm trying to get him on, so we'll see if we can get him on. But yeah, he's got loads of. He goes through all of them, and he talks about how these can produce big issues to people, and they don't understand why things are going wrong because they're eating these healthy foods. But I mean, have you looked into the blue zones?
Yeah.
And one of the things they have, in their pantry, is their whole foods, but some of them are these herbs, etc. But they're always in whole food, and they're eating seasonally, which is different. People say, "Well, they eat them there." It's like, yeah, but they're eating them a lot differently to what we do. Whereas we just go, "Well, that's good for us. We'll have 10 of them." Where was I the other day? I was at a yoga studio, and I looked at the board, and they had all the different options for their smoothies. I was like, that one should just be called the oxalate shake. Everything was in it, and I was just like, these things, if people don't know what they're doing, they start having them every morning, becomes an issue. So no, you can touch on lectins, etc. That's not a problem.
Right, yeah. Just so your listeners kind of understand the concept, is this right? So you have this whole movement, the game changers, the powers that be, kind of pushing this idea of plant-based diets on people, and highlighting the many nutrients that you find in plants, highlighting the benefits to the environment, highlighting the supposed evidence that show that animal products are unhealthy and whatnot. And so it generally tends to get people to people are really easily convinced, right, that these plant-based diets are great. There's no downsides to them, right? What possible downsides could there be to eating more plants, right? We have this fundamental belief that plants are inherently benign and that they are inherently healthy, right? And so actually, if you speak to anyone, they, generally the healthy option on a menu would be to eat the salad, right? Or be to eat the plate with all of the vegetables on, eat more fruits and vegetables because that makes you inherently more healthy. So this is kind of like a really common belief that the majority of people have adopted for no really known reason. Generally, we've been brainwashed into thinking this, but something that the majority of doctors, nutritionists, any kind of healthcare practitioner or healthcare provider or educator does not acknowledge, either they ignore or they are ignorant of, is that plants are fundamentally living beings, right? Much like every other living organism on this planet, it will do what it can to survive in any way possible, right? So, for instance, if you want to go and hunt a pig, a wild hog, for instance, or you want to go hunt a deer, when you go out to hunt it and you say you're holding up a bow or you have a gun and it spots you, it's going to run away, right? It's got legs to run away from you, to protect itself. Or
it's got antlers to hit you with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So whatever happens, they're either going to put up a fight with you or they're going to run away. The problem is plants can't do that, right? Plants don't have legs. Plants can't run away from you. But what they can do is they can prevent you from eating them or prevent you from eating their offspring or their family members just across the road, kind of thing. And the way that they do this is they release chemicals. They release chemicals which are essentially poisonous to some degree. And the level of poisonous or the level of toxicity depends on the type of plant and when, what kind of thing that they're releasing at any one given time. But essentially, I mean, it's not really hard. It's not a hard concept to get your head around, because if you were to go for a walk out in the woods right now and you were to pick up some random plant, or say you found some berries, if you were to randomly eat some berries, there's a very high likelihood that you would develop some kind of gastroenteritis, or you would develop diarrhea and an upset stomach, almost in all cases. In fact, around 95% of plants are actually inedible for human beings because they can make us really poorly. Either we'll get digestive symptoms, or some plants, if you get really unlucky and you eat the wrong plant, you can actually die, right? There's many plants which are fatal. And so actually what they do is they are releasing these chemicals. And there's a variety of subsections of chemicals. So people are familiar with the concept of celiac disease or gluten intolerance. The reason for gluten intolerance is generally relating to a certain type of toxin found in plants called a lectin. Now, gluten is a form of lectin. What this can effectively do is irritate our immune system in our gut. It can cause leaky gut. It can cause all kinds of autoimmune conditions. And there's a lot of research to indicate that actually, I mean, there's many people who have achieved complete remission from their autoimmune conditions simply by removing lectins from their diet, right? So this is well kind of acknowledged in the research community. Aside from lectins, you have other type of plant toxins as well. You have things like you have certain phytochemicals, you have phytoestrogens, you have hormone disrupting chemicals, things which when we ingest it actually can affect how our hormones work. So you can have estrogenic substances found in certain types of seeds. Yeah, like soy, like flaxseed.
Yeah.
Soy also contains lectins.
Sweet potatoes are quite estrogenic, aren't they, I think?
I think they're quite high in lectins.
Yeah.
They're high in oxalates. I'm not sure if they're estrogenic, but definitely things like flax seeds, sesame seeds, chia seeds, all of the kind of nuts and seeds which vegans eat a lot of and which are kind of promoted to be really healthy, these generally contain hormone disrupting chemicals, right? And so essentially what they can do is they can cause a man to develop gynecomastia, have low testosterone, and then inevitably become depressed, have low muscle mass, low libido, low fertility. So these things are like really common, right? And one of the classifications of plant toxins, like the question that you originally asked, is called oxalate. So oxalate is essentially, if you look at it under a microscope, it's like a sharp, spiky crystal. Okay, and it can exist in various different kind of structures. But generally, what you would see is it might be spiky, it might be kind of crystalline, it might be square in nature, but basically it's very sharp. You think of it a bit like a shard of glass, right? And so there's many plants which contain oxalates, and oxalates, the oxalate itself is actually like a magnet, so it binds very tightly with certain minerals. One of those is calcium, another one is magnesium, potassium. Now when it binds with calcium, it can form a calcium oxalate crystal, and when we eat plants which are very high in oxalate, what can happen is the body can actually accumulate this. Okay, so one of the most well-known health conditions associated with calcium oxalate toxicity or oxalate toxicity is actually kidney stones. Yeah. So around 80% of kidney stones are generally composed of calcium oxalate. And what calcium oxalate does in the kidneys is basically deposited there, and it builds up into this crystal, and essentially it's causing damage to the kidney, causing oxidative stress, and is very, very, very painful. Unfortunately, what isn't very well acknowledged or well recognized is that actually a diet which is very high in oxalate, not only can it cause kidney stones, but generally it can cause a wide variety of other health issues when the body accumulates this stuff. And so some of the plants which contain very high levels of oxalates are some of those things which we generally find seasonally. They don't grow all year round, and many of the things that we eat these days are actually tropical in nature, so they don't actually grow in the UK or in the Western world. So for instance, I'll give you some examples. Almost the highest is spinach. Spinach is abnormally high, but we also have rhubarb. We have the sweet potato and potatoes. They are relatively high. Many kind of salad vegetables. I mean, we have things like
dark chocolate.
Yeah, I mean, dark chocolate is extremely high. Any kind of nut, not so much macadamia nut, but generally almonds, cashews, pistachios, these kinds of things.
Potatoes are quite high. No, sorry, mate. Go on.
Potatoes are relatively high. Some of the other root vegetables are quite high, although the highest are generally, as I said kind of spinach, but you also have Swiss chard, various kind of types of kale. You have certain other leafy greens. You have what else do you have?
See, this is the thing, because there's different. As I've done the research on oxalates, and there's things that tends to be different lists depending on who you research. And so one of them was coffee was high in oxalates, and then if you listen to, I think it's Sally Norton, she says coffee not high in oxalates.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not. And so it depends. And there's some conflicting research. So I think it's Sally Norton, and there's another one, Susan Owens. Yeah. These are the two people you go to. Yeah, and also Donna Gates. Do you know Donna Gates still?
No, I don't know Donna Gates.
Donna Gates, yeah, she's got the body ecology diet. She's been one of the thought leaders in digestive health for years and years. Phenomenal, anyway. But yeah, you look at these, and these are because I think it's Susan who's got the low oxalate diet.
Try and low oxalate group. Try and low oxalates.
That's it, yeah. And so there was some, but for most people, I think a lot of the salads are not too bad. It's more of the leafy greens, right? Lettuce isn't too bad, but spinach.
The lettuce is fine, cucumber's fine. Yeah. There's a little bit in celery. Tomatoes are generally quite low. The really high offenders are generally the things that that we tend to eat lots of on a vegan diet, right? If someone's going to go on a vegan diet, or even like a ketogenic or a Paleolithic diet, generally foods which are quite low in carbohydrates, but which are kind of, for instance, raw cacao, so cacao powder. That's something which people who follow kind of a low carb diet, they think cacao's really healthy, and dark chocolate is very addictive for many people, but it can actually cause a lot of problems for a lot of people if they've got this kind of problem of accumulating it. Many of the nuts and seeds, almost all of the nuts and seeds, but also some of the grains, many of the gluten-free grains. So someone goes on a gluten-free diet, and actually what they find is they start substituting wheat with amaranth flour or tapioca or cassava or buckwheat. Yes. Many of these flours are actually just extraordinarily high. So generally what happens is someone goes from a standard diet, right? Standard diet is generally said to, what you're aiming to have is kind of nothing more than 150 milligrams. Although the average diet, people probably get a lot more than that. They probably get like 200 to 300 milligrams per day. That's not necessarily going to cause a problem in everyone, although it's, it still can potentially cause a problem for someone. The real issues tend to occur when people start doing things like smoothies or juices, right? So if you go onto any of these kind of vegan influencers, and they'll be recommending that, okay, this food is healthy, this food contains these nutrients. So what we will do is we will start juicing it. And so instead of eating like a small bunch of spinach on the side of your plate, you would use a whole bag of it to juice down into a tiny little shot. So you're getting an extreme amount, a very, very, very high amount concentrated in one individual dose. And what that means is you can have lots of it. So you'd be amazed. I have people get in contact with me, and I consult with them from all around the world who have a history of doing juicing, right? They have a history of going through these phases where they feel really good. They'll be juicing celery, carrots, spinach, kale, and they'll be doing this multiple times throughout the day. Like you said, just because something's good, people tend to take it to the extreme. So they think, oh, okay, if spinach is good, then what I will do is, I'll use 2 bags every single day. And the problem is that there are very real consequences for this. So we have to understand this stuff is a toxin. In fact, pound for pound, oxalic acid is, in toxicology, it's known as a toxin. So they've used it for at least 100 years in essentially assessing toxicity of various kind of organisms. But essentially, pound for pound, this is more toxic than asbestos, right? So what happens is that when someone takes a load of these juices, or they go on a vegan diet, or they go on a kind of very high oxalate diet, pigging out on these high oxalate containing foods, what happens is the gut bacteria to some extent can degrade some of that. You have these things called oxalate degrading bacteria, but a lot of the time, because of things like antibiotic use, because of kind of chronic intake of pesticides and things, which also have antibiotic activity on our gut. Yeah, exactly. What tends to happen is that many of those so-called beneficial bugs, which do protect the gut, which do kind of help to get rid of oxalate and bind it and get rid of it, many of those can be killed off. And oftentimes when someone has a leaky gut as well, it means that we're more likely to absorb this stuff. Whereas ordinarily, if we'd have had like a healthy gut, we might be less likely to absorb it in the past. And so essentially what's happening is people that are loading themselves with this poison oftentimes, and the kidneys can only deal with so much at any one given time, right? There are cases of people, I mean, there's clinical case studies of people who have done smoothies, who've actually given themselves acute renal failure and have been admitted into the emergency room at the hospital and like had to go on dialysis temporarily because of drinking these green smoothies.
Humans.
Yeah, it's only humans, exactly. I mean, if you try to feed certain plants to animals, you try to give your dog a green smoothie, most of the time they're just going to like knock it to the other side of the room. The animals know that this stuff is not food, but actually humans, when ideology takes over, we can very much kind of get lost in this stuff. But essentially, the main kind of problems that this can lead to, and theoretically, oxalate can be involved in many different kinds of health issues. But essentially, if you think about it like this, right, when you're absorbing a lot of these crystals essentially in the gut, what can happen is you have this oxalate bound to some kind of mineral, whether it be potassium, magnesium, and it's floating through your bloodstream. And what can happen is this can eventually precipitate out in tissues. So it can precipitate in like the joint capsule, for instance. And here it can produce a condition called oxalate-induced arthropathy, which mimics arthritis.
And fibro as well, right?
Pardon? Fibromyalgia?
Yeah,
indeed. So basically it can deposit in the joints and the muscles and cause stabbing, sharp pains, can cause aching, can cause inflammation. You think about it, it's like a shard of glass in your joint, right? Every time you move, it can hurt. And what people find is this flares. So it can actually be contributing to chronic inflammatory conditions because it's picked up by the immune system as a toxin, rightly so. So the immune system will essentially mobilize an inflammatory response against that. Now, if someone has a chronically high intake of these oxalates, then they can effectively deposit it all throughout the body. You can have oxalates in the teeth, you can have it in the gums, in the nasal cavity, in the thyroid gland, very common in the thyroid gland. And what it will usually cause in the thyroid gland is it can lead to Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It can lead to kind of hypothyroidism, other thyroid conditions, generally pumping up TSH. And many people find that actually when they go on a low oxalate diet, that actually their thyroid condition improves greatly. But also what it's potentially contributing to, one of the characteristic conditions laid out, really one of the first individuals who kind of really looked into this was related to vulvodynia. So that's actually vulva pain in the lady's vagina.
Okay, yeah.
The outer surface of the vagina can essentially accumulate these crystals, and you can have kind of this chronic severe itching and pain. And it's generally caused by these oxalate crystals in many individuals. There's just a wide variety of things that oxalates can contribute to. Chronic urinary tract infections, chronic yeast infections because of the way that it's messing with the microbiome in the vagina and in the gut. So if someone has chronic yeast infection, oxalate is potentially involved there. There's just a wide variety of things. I mean, generally, I see a lot of people with interstitial cystitis who have been told that they've got a UTI, but then when they actually do when they go to have their urine cultured for bacteria, they find that actually there's nothing there, but they've got all of the symptoms of a UTI, and it continues for a very long time. Essentially, what I suspect is that in these people, because it kind of flares and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down, generally gets worse when they eat foods like dark chocolate or spinach or certain other foods which contain very high levels of oxalate. What it can actually be is as the body is trying to clear these crystals or these shards, these oxalate crystals, going through the bladder, it's causing irritation, it can potentially allow an infection to embed itself, but essentially it's tearing all throughout the urinary tract and essentially, wreaking havoc kind of thing. So, yeah, oxalate is again one of these kind of poisons, and it is becoming more and more common in our daily diets because essentially many of these foods, rhubarb, spinach, which do grow in the UK, many of the foods don't, but the ones that do grow in the UK, they only grow for a couple months every year, right? So we historically would have only had access to a couple of the oxalate containing foods for say a couple of months, and then we would have given our body time for say 8 months of the year throughout kind of fall and winter time to effectively clear that out. But the problem is that now, because we have international export, we can ship in foods from all around the world. We can have any food that we want 24/7. There is no seasonality. We have kind of lost the environmental control mechanism for, I guess, determining how much we can actually intake. So then we've got this problem of, okay, we've got this chronic influx of this poison, and it's making people really sick. And it's only something that you're going to see much more of as people do adopt these plant-based diets, which are inherently unnatural in and of themselves. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the only people that Gerson found Weston Price found that weren't eating meats or animal foods were those that wasn't readily available. And so when you talk about like juicing, because there's great therapies like the Gerson therapy that has been curing advanced disease for a long time, but he wasn't juicing. I don't know if you've done much research. You probably have done a lot of research on it, on the Gerson therapy. Have you? I don't know. To talk to the daughter. What's her name? For some reason, it's a bit. My memory's just gone. What's her name again? The daughter, not his daughter who took it on. I can't remember.
Not sure.
It's not Sally. Mark. It doesn't matter. She recently passed, but they talked about he wasn't juicing spinach. He was juicing things like apple and carrot in like megadosing these things, and so I'm pretty sure those two aren't very high in oxalates at all, and very very high in pectin. As well, an enzyme. So it depends on what you're doing. This is why it's a little bit of knowledge is dangerous in these things, because people say, "Oh, these things are good. We might as well do them all." It's like there's reasons why specific foods are used in these therapies. But as you went through, it can be linked to so many things. And if you haven't got that, like, say, acute symptom of that pain. It's a bit like fluoride, right? And it bioaccumulates in the body, and then all of a sudden you've got this issue that you didn't know, and that's why people don't know what's caused it, because all of a sudden it's there, and it's not like, oh, I did this and I ate that. This has been coming over a period of time, so it can bioaccumulate in different areas. And you mentioned there, like, there's so many different parts. You mentioned the joints, and then you mentioned like vagina for women. I mean, you can get in all issues, and kidney stones. If anyone knows anyone who's had a kidney stone, how painful that is. It's something that people need to really be aware of, right? And to think, oh, actually, maybe it's time to, like, this is why I talk a lot about, I'm sure you do as well, but with my clients and people, talk about rotating foods a lot. So you're not just having the same foods over and over again, because you get food sensitivities, you can get build up of these things. But for you, like, you mentioned a couple there. What are they linked to? Any other sort of illnesses? You mentioned fibro. You mentioned chronic fatigue. Did you mention chronic? No, it wasn't chronic fatigue, was it? You mentioned arthritis. You mentioned arthritis. Anything else? Like, these are all also immune conditions. But anything else you come across? Oh, kidney stones.
Quite a lot of things, right? You'd be amazed. So there's. Right, if you look at the research literature or you speak to a doctor, then they will generally be under the impression that oxalates are only a problem if someone has kidney stones, right? But what we're finding, and this isn't really due to my research, this is the work of Susan Owens. So Susan Owens runs a Facebook group. It's called Trying Low Oxalates, and it's on Facebook. And anyone can join. And there's, I think now there's like 25,000 members or something. And she's been looking into oxalates for, I think, around 2 decades. So she's done a lot. She understands a great deal about this. And essentially, there's this dogma, this belief that the only thing that the only problem it contributes to is the kidney stones. But actually what they're finding and what I've been seeing clinically is that people can present with a wide variety of different health problems. Like we've said, this kind of arthritis, but this doesn't have to be arthritis. This can be any kind of chronic muscular pain, any kind of chronic joint pain, disc herniation, nerve pain. You see, anything which is kind of unexplained or may have a diagnosis, they may be able to somewhat explain it, but actually is chronic, persistent. It can contribute to any kind of muscular or skeletal pain. Okay, that's one thing. Secondly, what we know is that it can essentially disrupt the cardiovascular system. So as it's traveling through the bloodstream, it can effectively cause inflammation in the vascular system. It can affect how the blood vessels dilate and contract. So some people develop things like nervous system disorders where they can't effectively, actually myself, as after I went through kind of a year or two of eating very high oxalate foods. Originally, I was looking to as I was studying nutrition, I was pommeling spinach, kale, dark chocolate, 99% dark chocolate, right?
Where did you study?
I went to CNM.
Yeah,
right?
that's why you're doing that.
Yes, exactly. So they're massive proponents of plant-based diets, right? So just to kind of sidetrack, the reason why I didn't go study the conventional route of nutrition was because I was convinced that the 5 a day kind of, healthy plate FDA guidelines, I was convinced that was wrong. And I was hoping to kind of go the alternate route. It turns out that actually I went the CNM route, and it turns out it was just as bad, probably worse, because they are very much geared towards plant-based. 100%. So actually, in that case, you really kind of need to use your thinking cap and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, no judgment. When I saw it, I was like, oh, he studied there. I was like, cool. I was like, and it's interesting that you've gone this road, because I remember I went there like years ago, and they had Brian Hippocrates, what's his name? Brian Clement. And I was just looking at him going, and I know a lot of people that they've dealt with, and people that want his head on a plate, and then I was like, you don't look healthy to me, my man.
Yes.
And a lot of these things, I'm just like, and I went down and they tried to get me to do their degree there, and I was like, I just don't feel it. Just didn't feel right, and that's why I went down another road. I went to America and certain people, and one of them was Paul Chek. You'd really like him, and Donna Gates and a few other people. But it was interesting you're saying that, because that was when I remember sitting there once at a seminar they were talking about, and he was talking about just like how raw milk and Western A Price was, and I was just sitting there thinking, I don't know how you can say, like, completely disregard someone's like whole life work, that was like there's such like quality life work that it's been through. I was just sitting there thinking, and something just didn't add up. And it was funny that you said that you're doing that. So you're having all these things, dark chocolate and stuff, and you started to feel a bit off.
Yeah, basically many of the superfoods that that are kind of, even I was ketogenic at the time, right? But even the keto advocates, so the people are telling you that you should be, if you're on a ketogenic diet, then you need to be having 7 cups of fruit and veg a day, 7 cups of veg, like Dr. Eric Berg kind of thing, right? So anyway, yeah, so it was actually after that I developed a strange condition which is called acrocyanosis. Right, acrocyanosis is basically just random. It basically affects how the blood vessels in the hands, generally the hands, but sometimes the feet as well, how they contract and dilate. Right, so actually what you can develop is kind of a blue tinge to the hands. It's essentially hypoxia. So you got very poor blood flow to the hands. And I developed that almost immediately after going on my oxalate binge, right? And I was looking in the literature, because no doctor has ever been able to explain this. It's kind of autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And actually one of the risk factors for developing idiopathic acrocyanosis is oxalosis, which is basically hyperoxaluria, someone eating too many oxalates, so overloading their body with that. So that can cause acrocyanosis.
Acrocyanosis, and it sounds a little bit like Raynaud's.
It's not Raynaud's. That's the different thing. So Raynaud's, it presents somewhat similarly, but it's not the same thing. With Raynaud's, generally there will be like 2 or 3 fingers which go completely white, and then after when you go inside, the hands, the color of the hands will normalize. Whereas with acrocyanosis, generally it doesn't present clinically like that. It's actually just a persistent kind of blue or bright red tinge to the hands. And that's something which, has gradually gotten better. But it's not completely gone away. And the only thing that I can really put down to that, you see, the thing is that oxalate can very well kind of deposit throughout the vascular system and kind of mess up the neurons as well. So it can deposit in the nerves and kind of affect how nerve signals, you see, it carries an electric charge. So it can affect how nerves are able to effectively send messages to one another. So you can end up with kind of weird neuropathies and neuropathic pain and kind of strange neurological symptoms kind of thing. That's very common. But at the same time, it can affect kind of how well the vascular system is working. It can deposit in the heart, in the aorta. It can cause things like ruptures in the vascular system. It can affect the liver, the kidneys. Practically every known organ, right, can accumulate oxalates. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is the cause for every single health condition. Someone can have arthritis for a wide variety of different reasons, but there are certain kind of a clinical phenotype, you might say, and if you know what to look out for when you work with people, you will see it present. It's like, okay, they started eating the green smoothies, or they started eating plant-based, or they started eating lots of dark chocolate or something, and then all of a sudden, that is when their health really started to plummet, and at that time, that's when they started developing all of these kind of symptoms.
So, a couple of things. One, so has it been linked to Raynaud's at all?
Oxalate?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. I don't know.
I'll have a look into that because it'd be interesting to know. And because, so you said they eat these things and then they get these symptoms. How long generally do you notice from the time they start eating it or is it can be different for every person because everyone detoxes the body differently?
Yeah, so I mean, it really depends. Some people seem to be able to tolerate more than other people. I think it generally depends on kind of like the gut health and various other factors. But I mean, sometimes someone can go on kind of like a year of a very high oxalate diet, and after that year, then they will start to kind of notice that their symptoms get worse or that they develop kind of other symptoms. So I mean, it can be in a very short space of time.
So if people have been doing this for a while and they've been getting away from it, they may be all right. It doesn't mean they will be forever, but then maybe their body gets rid of oxalates better than others. Because I don't want people to sit there thinking, because let's be honest, the majority of people, we're not going to be sitting here saying, I want you to stop eating all these foods because they're high in oxalates. Because having them as part of like a diet where you rotate your foods and you're eating good foods, for most people it's not going to be a problem. It's the ones that go over the top or eat them most days of the week. Is that what you're saying? Because like, if you're having spinach once a week, it's not the same as having it every single day in your juice smoothie, right?
Well, I think this is going to be based on, like, again, it's individual. So if someone has a problem with oxalates, then they can't be eating spinach. Spinach is completely off the table. But I mean, for an average person, I don't think it's a problem, right? Like once a week. I mean, generally you want to be having kind of more than, 150 to 200 milligrams. So you may have some spinach on like one day a week or something. It's probably not going to be the end of the world, I'm not under that impression. But again, for someone who has a problem with this, then any amount of spinach is going to be lethal.
Oh no, if someone's got an acute problem with oxalates and stay away, and it's just interesting because what you were saying there, it seems like a lot of these things, a lot of foods that people eat can contain oxalates. So what I'm going to do is, for people that have got the issue, two things you want to know. In fact, prevention is always better than cure. So what people can do to mitigate these things, and also what people can do if they have got an issue to get rid of them. Because, as you mentioned before, gut health. From my research, it tells me things like having good gut bacteria, having things like fermented foods or probiotics can help to bind or to at least protect the gut, etc. Other things such as cooking your foods, boiling, for example, spinach or something like that with high in oxalates, and then throwing that water away because a lot of the oxalates would have been taken out in the cooking of those foods. Are these things that you've come across?
Yeah, so there's a couple things which can kind of let's say are protective, right? So one of those is going to be boiling, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not going to completely get rid of the stuff, but actually you see oxalate is water soluble. So generally anything which is an oil or something like that doesn't contain it. Whereas, like when you're cooking, you're boiling, generally the water is going to be coming out of the food that you're cooking. And so that's going to be pulling some of the oxalate, not all of it, not even a great deal of it, but some of it. So you can reduce it maybe by like 20% or something, maybe a little bit more in certain cases. So yeah, chucking away that water, the cooking water, it's important to note, I haven't really gone into that much detail, but essentially oxalic acid, when it's found in a plant, sometimes it's bound with the mineral, sometimes it's not. Generally it is bound. It's like a magnet, and it has the highest affinity for calcium, right? So when it binds with calcium, generally you're not going to absorb it in the gut. Okay, so actually, because a calcium oxalate stone or calcium oxalate as a kind of a crystal you can think of, when calcium is bound to oxalate, it makes it insoluble, which means that it kind of stays in the gut and it goes out through the poo. So basically, dietary calcium is, in that respect, protective. So people oftentimes, when they have problems with dairy and they go on a dairy-free diet and they replace the dairy with almond milk, that's a real problem because you're getting kind of a high oxalate load, but you're not getting the calcium to protect your body from that. So actually, dietary calcium, anything high in calcium taken with food which does contain oxalate, which is really interesting actually, because if you go to India, there's a dish which is called palak paneer, and that's actually cheese with spinach, right? It's the only dish that I know of that is like mainly spinach, but actually it's traditionally cheese with spinach. So actually mixing a high oxalate food, if you're going to have it, having some kind of dairy with that or some kind of calcium with that is going to help to stop you from absorbing it. Now that's assuming that your gut is kind of not too leaky. If you've got a leaky gut, then that doesn't necessarily work. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that dietary calcium or supplemental calcium, if someone can't tolerate dairy, then supplemental calcium before a meal which contains high oxalate is going to be protective. Okay. Another thing, again, there is kind of certain probiotics which are what we call protective kind of thing because they help to degrade oxalate in the gut. What's important to note, and we haven't really gone through this, is that basically the body will do what it can to get rid of oxalate. Okay, and so it does this generally in cycles. And the way that it knows when to get rid of oxalate is when the blood level of oxalate goes down a little bit. So basically, when you eat a food, then when you digest that, you're going to liberate some of the oxalate, and that's going to push up, when it's absorbed into the blood, it's pushed up the blood oxalate level. Now, when that's consistently high, your kidneys are not going to continually filter that because your kidneys can only deal with so much. It causes lots of oxidative stress. So what happens in that context is you are going to be continually storing this oxalate.
Right. It's like building up and then let the trapdoor go sort of thing. I get what you're saying.
Exactly. So the problem is that if you have a consistently high oxalate diet, then you're continually going to be storing it or accumulating it in some people. Whereas when someone learns about this and they go on to a lower oxalate diet, so in other words, they identify the foods which are high in oxalate and they reduce those gradually, what happens is the amount of oxalate coming in through the diet inevitably goes down. And what that means is that the blood level of oxalate coming from the diet goes down. And when that goes down, the body senses that, the tissues sense that, and they release the stored oxalate. Okay, they release it into the blood. Now, when it goes around in the blood, this is referred to as dumping. So in other words, when you lower oxalate in the diet, your body dumps oxalate. If you continue having a high oxalate diet, your body does not dump it. Right? It accumulates it. So the idea is that if someone does have this issue, this is actually one of the main ways that someone can determine whether they do have an oxalate problem or not, is when they reduce the oxalate content of the diet, what will happen is they'll go through a short honeymoon period, and then generally they will start to dump it. And what happens when you dump it is, as you're releasing it from the tissues, it will generally exacerbate whatever kind of health condition or whatever kind of symptom that you've previously had that is caused by the oxalate being there in the first place. So if it's joint pain, then as the tissue is releasing oxalate stored in the joints, this will cause pain. This will cause inflammation. Someone might feel feverish.
It's a healing crisis. It's a deep healing crisis. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Basically.
So they can go through all manner of issues, all manner of symptoms, depending on what it is.
All manner of symptoms, and what's going to happen is the body will either get rid of it through the kidneys. Mostly it will get rid of it through the gut. It can also get rid of it through the eyes, through the nose, through the mouth, through the skin, through the ears. Can come out of every single orifice, right? And some people actually report, I've had so many people who say that there's crystals come out their jawline, or crystals come out their skin, or crystals come out their, kind of, you get a small rash, and then you actually look and there's lots of little shards of kind of weird glass stuff, which doesn't it's really strange. And some people have actually had this stuff analyzed, and it turns out it is actually oxalate coming out of their skin. So it's bizarre, but essentially, it's the body's way of getting rid of that. Now, when you're dumping it into the gut, as I've said, if you've got some calcium in there to bind it, then that is going to stop you from reabsorbing it. We have this thing called hepatic reabsorption, basically recycling. So everything we dump into the gut, oftentimes we reabsorb a lot of it, and we don't want to be reabsorbing that if our aim is to get rid of this stuff from the body. So actually what happens then is, if you've got some calcium there, that can bind it. If you use certain types of probiotics, particularly spore forming biotics such as Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus clausii, I think it is, and some of the other spore formers, what they can actually do is degrade oxalate. There's various different types. I think even lactobacillus can do that. Yeah. So it can actually degrade oxalate, can protect you against that. So taking probiotics can help people like this. What oxalate is also doing, and this is really important, this is something which I haven't really touched on. I said that it binds with minerals. When it binds with minerals, it forms quite a tight bond. And so actually, if you're dumping this stuff through the kidneys, what oxalate generally tends to do is it can cause people to become very mineral deficient, certain electrolytes. So this being sodium, potassium, magnesium primarily. And what it's doing is when it's binding, it's carrying out through the urine. And if you go through a severe dumping episode where you cut out oxalate too quickly in the diet and you release a lot of this stuff stored, it can really pump up the blood level and basically cause someone to become like acutely hypokalemic, which means potassium deficiency. So they can go into to A&E and kind of think that they're having a heart attack. Oftentimes they're not. I haven't seen a case where they do have a heart attack. Generally, it is just potassium deficiency. And so what they need to do is actually replenish things like potassium, magnesium, and sodium. And at the same time, there is...
so what would you recommend for something like that? Like coconut water? Coconut water?
Yeah, I mean, coconut water is an excellent source of potassium, but in some of these cases, actually supplemental potassium seems to be necessary. I generally recommend, agree with Susan Owens' Sally Norton on this, is that what they generally recommend is citrate. So the mineral bound with the citrate, so potassium citrate, magnesium citrate, calcium citrate, and that's because the citrate is essentially a substance which is produced by the body, and what it can help to do is actually dissolve or break down oxalate crystals, calcium oxalate in particular. So if the body does have calcium oxalate deposited in various parts of the body or whatever, or in the kidneys, for instance, then citrate can really help to help break that down and kind of dissolve that and help your body pass that. So actually, this is a great way to kind of reduce pain in some people if they've got severe arthritic pain or severe kind of joint pain. Giving a high amount of the mineral citrates can really help with that.
Awesome. And so you said calcium, magnesium, and what was the other one you mentioned?
Potassium.
Potassium citrate. Cool. And so that's for people. I mean, so in general, even like if people are going to have these foods, maybe having something like a calcium citrate with the meal would be a good idea.
Yeah. Calcium citrate definitely with the meal.
Perfect. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned there about in India where they have spinach and cheese. It's like people don't realise there's reasons they do these things. For example, you go to Japan, people have sushi and they think, oh, I really love the ginger, the flavour, or the wasabi. It's like there's a reason they have ginger and wasabi with it. It's to kill the parasites that are present in the raw fish. Or, when people are doing these things like the lemon around the bottle of the Corona, they think it's the flavour. It was actually to kill the germs that was in the water, to sterilise the bottle. And so these things that people don't understand, they've got some reason and rhyme behind them. They're not just, oh, well, the flavour's good, but it's something behind them. So people are a bit more aware of these things. So it's quite interesting. I'm surprised. I'll be interested to see. Well, it's interesting to see what the Chinese or anything had anything to do with that, or traditional Chinese medicine has anything like this in terms of the oxalates as well.
Well, we put milk in our tea, right?
Yeah.
Tea is very high in oxalates, and so black tea is going to be fundamentally really contributing to our overall load. Whereas you put milk in your tea and you're going to substantially reduce that burden.
Makes it. So you mentioned before about like these fermenting foods as well. You said making bioavailable. So things like fermented kefir, or kefir is fermented, but that works. In terms of having the probiotic-rich calcium food in your gut?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I think kefir generally helps with most things, right? If someone tolerates it, then I think it's definitely one of the things which we could all probably do with more of.
Yeah, 100%. So really, we've gone through, just being aware of oxalates, so people can know not to have too many of them. Things they can do whilst, if they cook it, obviously boiling can help with removing the water. Then you're talking about combining it with, if you have something like potassium, calcium, or magnesium citrate. Then otherwise something like a calcium in the food, as you mentioned before, the dairy with the spinach. And if they've got the symptoms, what would be you mentioned if you stopped eating them the body would detox, but is there go and work with someone to go through this, because would it be quite a painful experience? Was there certain things you can do to help the pain?
Yeah, right. Okay, so it's just first of all really important to kind of just clarify that when we say detox, it's kind of, I guess this is semantics, but essentially the body is not detoxing oxalate, right? So there's no, if you look at if you look at the detox pathways in the liver, for instance, for your listeners, we generally have like 3 phases of detoxification. There's very specific pathways. So we're conjugating specific metabolites, chemicals and things with certain other chemicals. So we have glutathione, we have glucuronidation, methylation, acetylation, all these different pathways. Whereas with oxalate, we do not have a specific pathway to get rid of it, right? So we don't transform it. We don't kind of neutralize it to make it more safe before it goes out of the body. We just move it. And the problem is that we can't upregulate that process through taking any kind of specific detoxification agent. And at the same time, we can't necessarily, we're not packaging it up and getting rid of it in a safe way. As it's going out the body, whichever orifice it's coming out of, it's going to be causing damage.
Right. So 100%. I wanted to just quickly, because you said you can reabsorb these foods by having quality stuff in, like probiotics, bacteria in the gut. That would be one way to mitigate it out or to get rid of it. No.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's probably not going to be sufficient though. Okay. Definitely, you'd want to be using calcium, some form of calcium. It doesn't necessarily need to be citrate, but yeah.
But adding those two together, that would be a good thing to do.
That would be an excellent thing to do. Secondly, what you have to understand is that when it's coming out of the gut, it's likely going to be causing severe irritation. So many people that come to me, they generally have rectal bleeding, severe rectal itching, diarrhea. Diarrhea is a major consequence of this, because you see, if you're getting it into the gut and the body is kind of irritating the gut, the body can basically just say, look, we need to get rid of this stuff. So, flush it all out. And it's good in that context. This generally tends to happen cyclically, right? So someone goes on a very low oxalate diet. Something I see quite a lot is someone will just have cyclical diarrhea once every 2 weeks for no reason. They'll have perfect normal stool every other day, and then once every 2 weeks, almost like clockwork, they will just have severe diarrhea and nothing changes in their diet. And actually in these people, it tends to be that they've been on a high oxalate diet previously, and all of a sudden it's like their body is cyclically going through this circadian cycle kind of thing of getting rid of this stuff, and they tend to do it through their gut. But what people often find is that when they're cycling through this process, they may get diarrhea, and at the same time they might also have cloudy urine, or their urine might kind of burn, or there might be kind of urinary irritation, so they might be going to the toilet kind of 9 times, not feel that they're able to properly kind of empty their bladder kind of thing. So yeah, the only kind of thing that you can do to help your body along through this process is is to kind of do what we said, replace the minerals. Sometimes some vitamins can help. So in terms of, if you're looking at the vitamins that oxalate kind of deplete, one of those is biotin. Another one is thiamine B6. Depending on the individual context, then actually, someone is going to respond to that potentially. But really, yeah, you just kind of have to sit through it. And in some cases, if someone ascertains that this is their problem, then they will want to get rid of all of it really quickly. So say if they were on a really high oxalate diet, they'll want to immediately remove all oxalate containing foods. Well, that's a very bad idea, because what that means is that the body is going to
dump it.
Yeah, dump really quickly, and this is when you kind of go into a crisis. And so if someone does this, and there will inevitably, I'd imagine, be at least one person listening to the podcast who says, right, this sounds like me, so I'm going to get rid of all the oxalates. And I always see it every single time I give a talk on this, every single time I speak to someone about this, they do the same thing. They get rid of all of it. And then what happens is they go through severe symptoms. Everything gets really bad. And the best thing that someone can do in that context is to eat some oxalate containing foods, because what that does is it props back up the oxalate level in the blood, and it actually stops their body from getting rid of everything, and they need to slow down and go at a slow pace. So it's more about a gradual, very slow reduction of the content of the diet, right? And if people want to kind of learn about this stuff, I mean, the Trying Low Oxalates group on Facebook is excellent. They've actually put together some modules, like learning modules, like, okay, what is dumping? What's the research? What's the mechanism? What's the symptoms? What's the foods? All of that kind of stuff. And it's very much a kind of comprehensive resource for people learning about that. Now, of course, yeah, I mean, many people find that they need more support. I'll be honest, a lot of the times oxalates aren't always, they're not usually the only problem. There's usually lots of other stuff going on. So it's addressing all of that stuff in conjunction with addressing the oxalate stuff. And sometimes a practitioner is necessary for that. And there's a handful, there's a couple who kind of know how to address this and kind of how to guide someone through it. Some people need holding their hand. Other people, just a community of people, kind of to acknowledge or to know that they're not alone in this experience is enough. Because there's communities out there who basically talking about their symptoms, talking about what they can do to improve it. Yeah, I don't think there's anything I've missed out. I mean, there could be, Epsom salts baths, they also come in handy. It provides sulfur. Sulfur generally helps the body with oxalates, helps the body clear it. Yeah, I think that's
cool. No, that's cool. We covered a lot. I just wanted to say, because for people out there, it's important. One of the things you said, at the beginning, this is why these plants, if you've got a healthy gut and you're healthy, your body can deal with them. not generally okay, but this is why, as Elliot said earlier, animals, they have teeth or hooves or antlers or whatever, horns to protect themselves. Plants don't, and so you've got to understand that they have the defense mechanism is built up in their actual in their body. Or there's a great book out there as well for this. It's Plant Paradox, but also people don't realize that plants are actually alive. They can move. They actually are conscious. There's a great book out there called The Secret Life of Plants. I don't know if you've read it.
Yeah, by Stephen Boomer.
Yeah.
Booner?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, the guy's excellent. Yeah. They can be used as medicines, right?
100%, yeah, 100%. It's just where it's like that little things. You've got to know the dose of certain things. You've got to know what your body is. And as I always say, and I'll say it again and again, you're a study of one. Okay, so you need to look at yourself and understand that just because someone else isn't reacting doesn't mean you won't, or vice versa. And because you use plant medicines in your clinic, right, or you do with your clients, so they do have benefits.
Indeed, they do.
And so
in the right context.
And maybe that's something we can have a chat about another time, because it's been great. We've covered a lot, and I just want people to understand. So where can people find you, my man?
Yeah, so I have a website, www.eonutrition. I post a little bit on Facebook, EO Nutrition as well, but this past year I've been making a lot more videos on YouTube. So that's kind of a new thing, but I think altogether I've probably got about 30 lectures on there, 30 videos on there, and I like to flesh out.
What's the handle?
It's EO Nutrition.
On YouTube as well?
EO Nutrition, yeah. So EO Nutrition. And that's where I like to kind of go through the details of, I do a lot of stuff on oxalates. I've got, other interviews, other mechanistic kind of videos and things like that. And awesome. I'll be posting more stuff on there.
Awesome, my man. Thanks very much for today, my man. We covered a lot, and I think it's going to blow a few people away and to understand that these... oxalates and what they are, what they can do, and how we need to be mindful about how much of them we're eating, and things that we can do to prevent and also to help the body clear or dump them. So, great talking to you, Elliot. Thanks very much, and I'll definitely be getting you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
So there we have it, guys and girls. That was Elliot Overton talking all about his health journey. Who he doesn't work with and why a plant-based diet isn't the answer for everyone, especially going into the dangers of some of these things such as oxalate. And if you haven't heard of oxalates before the show, I think it's time to have a little look into them and just start. If you're feeling okay eating them, not a problem. Some people, as we talk about, can get rid of them better than others, but it's an accumulation. So just be wary of what you're eating and how much of it you're eating, and just have a think. If you've got some of these issues, you think, oh my god, I've actually been eating a lot of those foods that contain oxalates. Maybe it's time just to change up and have a little think about what it is you're eating and where you can make those changes, because it's something that isn't talked about a lot, but we're going to try and give it some more airtime, because I think people need to understand that not everything is made equal, and just because people think it's a health food doesn't necessarily mean it is a health food, and more of something that's good for you isn't necessarily always the best option. So you need to look into it. So that was Elliot. We'll definitely be getting him back on the show, so don't worry. It was a really good interview, really pleasure talking to him. It's a fun interview, and we've got lots more we can go into, and we definitely will. So that's it for this week, guys and girls. As always, if you are looking for help with your health, then we've got a few different options. If you head over to www.reviveyourself.co, we've got our shop there full of supplements, high quality supplements and health boosting protocols or equipment, I should say, like Aries Tech for the EMF blocking devices and our Aquaterra water filtration systems, as well as supplements from Evolution Organic, the Finchley Clinic and Ancient Purity. All of them I highly recommend. I wouldn't recommend anything to you guys I wouldn't take myself. And if you haven't already got a copy of the Chronic Fatigue Solution, you can head over to www.thechronicfatiguesolution.com. That's www.thechronicfatiguesolution.com to get your copy now. You've got the hardback version, or you've got the option of buying the audiobook. And as I said before, I am just in the midst of changing my publisher, so it takes a little bit longer than normal. It should be 10 working days, so it could be 3 weeks, then just hang in there. If you are waiting on one, it's been a bit of a long time, send me an email to ryan@reviveyourself.co and I'll get back to you. And on that, actually, if you have been dealing with a chronic health issue and you haven't been able to overcome it, and you're looking for someone to help you through that, then you can send me an email at ryan@reviveyourself.co and we can have a little chat, book a call to have a chat to see if and how we can help you, which I'm sure we can, and we'll go from there, because I know how hard it is going through something yourself and trying to get to the root of it yourself. Sometimes it can be like the person just wandering around in the dark, not knowing what to do first, especially with the amount of misinformation and conflicting information out there today. It can be a real struggle, so we can cut through all that and get you on the road to health and happiness. So that's it for this week, guys and girls. I hope you are having a good week, and as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
If you're struggling with gut issues, such as gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, indigestion, heartburn, and want to finally be able to eat the foods you love without the crippling after effects, then don't forget to head over to reviveyourself.co and pick up your free copy of The Healing Health Paradigm today.